started now with our meeting right here at 5:02. We don't have any kind of a closed session or special session tonight, so we'll launch right into the library business, and we'll start with a roll call. Trustee McMullins?
Here.
Trustee Khan?
Here.
Trustee Andrews is here. Trustee Capel?
Here.
And Trustee Clark?
Here.
All right, we're all here. The next item is the approval and reordering of agenda items. Does anybody have anything there?
Yeah, we'd like to cancel 6C, approval of the updated investment policy. We'll reschedule it for next month.
Investment policy.
You said 6C?
C.
Okay. And then I have one, and that would be to move the Strategic Planning Committee report up to number 1 under committee reports, in the interest of keeping Katie on time. She might leave tonight for an appointment. Anything else?
You're going to move it from 3 to 1? Okay.
Okay, with that, can I get a vote to approve the reordering of the agenda items with moving E3 up a couple of spaces, and also it was 6C, did you say, Cindy? That we are
6C.
6C, yeah, and dropping that one for the next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
No one's opposed, so that motion will carry. Next, we've got
Just do it.
okay, so with that, I'd like to get a motion to adopt the agenda where we reordered it.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Now we've got a segment for public comment on non-agenda items, and I haven't got any cards up here. Is there anybody that would like to speak before we get started?
Make sure you come to the pitch party.
Okay, yes, pitch party. We'll
Pitch
report on that
party.
again during the meeting.
It's like a book club.
Right. Now we have the consent calendar with the minutes and departmental monthly reports, and as usual, what I'd like to do is get a motion to approve that, and we'll stop and have a discussion about those items.
So moved.
So moved?
Second.
Second, okay. So is there any discussion among the board members about those items? Obviously, this is a great time to comment on some of the reports and so on, so I'll get started. And that is, I like Carlene's description of a day over at the branch library, and the way she did it, sort of a little bit like a little short story.
It was
I like
like-
that a lot. It really
it was
captured the
literary,
flavor of
yeah.
the place over there. So I wanted to shout out to Marlene. I don't see her here tonight, but if someone could pass that on, I'd appreciate it.
I wanted to mention the whole display and setup and attention for National Hispanic Heritage Month, which of course was in September. But it was great to see that happening, as well as sort of increasing our outreach to Spanish language communities and doing more on our Latinx outreach generally. So that was really cool, and I appreciated reading about that in this report.
I'm just going to give a shout out again because you're absolutely right about Carlene. Okay, report on an overview of what happens daily at the branch libraries. Really a nice touch. Thank you for that. Also the teens. You had class visits of 150 middle school students and 54 library cards. I'm assuming these are new library cards. So the outreach and marketing that you're doing and the collaboration you're doing is really wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Oh, hi, Carlene. Thank you so much for that overview of what happens daily at the branch library. Actually, a wonderful overview, a really neat taste, really neat idea. Helen did something with NASA. Is it NASA and My Library? 30 attended that. Something happened in October, is that right? Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, okay then. All right, let's see if I can, oh, it's on.
You
I'll
just need to
move
be
it over.
closer, yeah.
Okay, and there was a great display that, for the children and family, for the Hispanic Month, National Month. And I'm just gonna say this because I read Cindy's report and I can't wait to say that was an amazing amount of work that's been happening here at the library. And I am so glad that everybody's here to see that because you need to see that report. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Can I just say, I want to shout out to Jonathan. Jonathan and I ran into each other at the California Library Association after a session that actually Michaela and I had attended about disaster preparedness. And I love the story about the keys, you know, with everything that's going on with disasters, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I learned later. Just to know that those details are being looked at and taken care of at our buildings is comforting and not surprising at all to hear.
And I'll tag on to that with just a comment, and that is that as facilities sort of zeroes in on a plan of the facilities committee, I'm appreciative, Jonathan, that you're finding lots of things to fix that don't have to be refixed, we hope, sometime going forward. And I know you've really been paying a lot of attention to that, so thanks for the diligence and triaging the jobs you have to do and making sure the big ones don't go repeated when we really get serious about doing some work here. Okay, well, I think that is the end of the discussion, so with that, we've already moved and seconded the approval of these reports. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, and that motion carries.
Sorry.
Okay, there's no consideration of items removed from the consent calendar, so we are on to reports. And under 5A, we have update on public unified school district closures from Jennifer Lee from the Altadena Town Council. She's not, okay. Did she expect maybe to be a little later then?
I have no idea, but I'm gonna move that we just table this
Okay.
until she arrives, and if she ends up not making it, I can give a substitute.
Okay, that sounds great.
So,
I don't think that takes a vote, right? We can just talk about it in your report later on? Okay,
Yes.
and we will make time for her and room for her if she does show up between now and then. Now, then we are on to report of the support groups, and we'll start with the Altadena Library Foundation. This is Bridget Brewster.
Thank you. I'm gonna assume this is on, and is it?
yes.
It never sounds like it when I'm actually talking. As always, I want to begin by thanking you, the trustees, for your commitment to this library and all you do. Our Taste of Dena was a huge success, but it's always good to remind ourselves that events such as this require so much work and so many hours of dedicated time. And I learned this year uncounted number of tiny, tiny little lights everywhere. We made more than $20,000. And we will be happily using that to fund needs of the library. But I want you as trustees to especially know that it is always noticed and always appreciated when you attend these events that we do. People notice it, especially the committee that works so hard. It means a lot to them. It's better than, no, I was gonna say it's better than your money, but no. I'm not gonna kid you, no, it's not, no, it's not. The planning committee was chaired by Cynthia Carmona and Cynthia Kumanchik. And we could not have done it without the dedicated, strong energy from staff, Michaela, Chloe, as well as other staff members and the volunteers that uni round up for us as well. And all of them really deserve your praise and gratitude for the work they've done for the library. We're also pleased to have received a grant from Pasadena Community Foundation in the amount of $15,000. And that will go to help with technology upgrades. And then we're going to continue to look for other opportunities for grants to help support various needs of the library. Foundation board members just completed a performance evaluation in preparation for our annual planning retreat. Our hope is to create a very bold working plan that will reflect and dovetail with the strategic plan that's been created by you, the staff, friends of the library, the foundation, and the community together. So as we move into the critical time of goal setting, we're going to be also evaluating our capacity to address the needs of the library as we go forward and our ability to raise significant funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. What an outstanding job on Taste of Dina too. That's just terrific.
Didn't they do a great job?
Yeah, this excellent. One quick comment too about the Pasadena Community Foundation grant, and this is a little bit of, I guess, unsubstantiated, but I had heard about a year ago they weren't really interested in the Altadena Library at all as a grant recipient, simply because of the issues that we were going through. So congratulations to everybody for seeing that grant through. It's really gratifying to get that. Right. The next report is from Friends of the Library, and Joy, is that you? Okay.
Good evening. As I am sure all of you know, this coming Saturday, November 2nd, the Friends are hosting our 60th anniversary party, and everyone is welcome. We invite and encourage all of the members of the Board of Trustees and the staff of the library to join us there. There will be interesting exhibits. We're working hard on those now, a historical quiz, and a number of people will be promoting or pitching, as Claire says, their favorite books. There'll be lots of food and drink. And it's not too late for any of you who would like to pitch your favorite book to sign up. Everyone who does so will win a prize. Or you may just want to come and sit and watch and enjoy, and that's fine too. Should be a fun evening, and it will begin at 6:30, and we hope to see a lot of you there. The Friends has increased the amount originally planned to be donated to the library this year. The total amount we will donate is $34,500. And of that amount, we will pay directly for the Poetry and Cookies event and for the Chamber Commerce series that is going to be scheduled. And we will present a check for the remainder, a correct check, for the rest of that amount to the library at the 60th anniversary party. The Friends have now spent 60 years with no general liability or directors and officers insurance. And we have never had a problem. But times have changed, and although we don't anticipate any issues, we have voted to obtain the insurance, and we're in the process of acquiring both of the policies. In searching for historical information about the Friends, which I think I mentioned once before, we made a wonderful discovery that was sort of in front of our eyes the whole time. And I'm happy to report that downstairs in the technical services area, there is a large plastic bin that contains a treasure trove of historical information about the library and the Friends, dating back to the early 1950s. Another member of the Friends Board and I have been very carefully and slowly going through those scrapbooks with tremendous interest and enjoyment. They're very fragile and they have to be handled with care. The paper is old and brittle, and the documents and articles are stained with the glue that was used at the time. I understand that there is a plan to digitize that information, which would be a wonderful thing, and make all of the materials available to everyone. Whereas now, probably the less they're handled, the better. It contains fascinating information that I did not know, and I've been around long enough that I should know probably more than I do. For example, the origin of the Altadena Library was a shelf of books in the foyer of a 3-room schoolhouse located on Calaveras Street, and that was in 1908. The teachers maintained the collection for a number of years until the first librarian, Miss Emily Daubney, arrived in 1918, and the library was given its own space. The first president of the first Altadena Library Board of Trustees was Dolly Gray, elected in 1927. She was the wife of Zane Grey, the famous Western novelist. And another interesting discovery was the role that the Friends played as a catalyst for the construction of this building. The second expenditure that the Friends made after organizing was to fund a professional survey in 1962 to determine what Altadena should have in the way of a library and how it could be obtained. The survey cost $2,500 and was conducted by the Real Estate Research Corporation of Los Angeles. The survey showed the need for a library about 4 times what was currently available in the Lake Avenue property. The trustees then decided to build on this land, which was formerly owned by Colonel Green of Castle Green fame, and which the library had purchased, I think, in 1961 to hold for possible future development. So they decided to build here. The Friends of the Library then proceeded to organize a sponsors committee of prominent Altadenans to work for the bond issue needed to fund the construction. And that bond issue was passed in October 1963. So that's just a little bit of all of the interesting information we have found, some of which will be available or on display at the party Saturday night. So again, we welcome all of your attendance and hope that you will be able to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. That was very enlightening. I'm going to be anxious to see that. And thanks for raising your expectations of money you'll be getting. That doesn't happen often, so good work. All right, next we have the district director's report.
I'd like to start, I should have said this in the beginning of the meeting, but I'd like to start my report with by introducing Carlene Chu, who's here to do a presentation on technical services. Since they are on staff time, I'll start with her report, and I will end my report with mine.
glad to share what my department does on a daily basis. Starting with the staff, I'm the library manager, Carlene. Then we have a full-time library associate who specializes in acquisitions. Her name is Vicky. Then we have a part-time library associate who's in charge of cataloging, and his name is Mark. And we have a full-time library clerk too, who specializes in processing and doing our interlibrary loans, and her name is Selena. Current collection size for our main library is about 74,000 items, and the branch is about 6,300 items. So our team basically takes care of all these items, whether it be the records, the adding of new items, cataloging, making sure the records are correct and consistent. The first step is usually that the selectors will select the items and add the carts in Baker and Taylor. Once the carts are placed, they're sent to Vicky, and then she places the orders and imports the records from Baker and Taylor to COA. If the item is from Amazon, Vicky has to create the record from OCLC. Step 2 is receiving the items from the vendor. Vicky unpacks the boxes and does an inventory check using the packing slips and flips through the pages and does a quality check. She places them alphabetically on a cart. PIPs are patron-initiated purchase suggestions. They're placed on a separate cart to be handled right away as a priority. Then we do a records overlay, basically importing the record and make sure the information is correct. Processing. Items from Baker and Taylor are pre-processed, so we verify the labels and that they're tagged. Amazon items are not pre-processed, so we do have to do that in-house. We might have to find a better record or wrap or laminate the item. Create the call number, label, add the barcode, and stamp them with the Altadena Library District stamp and tag it in code. Magazines, we have about 177 titles, and then we have to basically process those, which is Selena's main duty. Put the current stickers on them, and barcode, and date the stickers. The other tasks we have are processing the PIPs, patron-initiated purchase request. We're over 2,000 now. Since October 2017, we have accepted over 2,000 PIPs. And a lot of those items, if unavailable from Baker and Taylor, will have to come from Amazon, and we have to process those in-house. We have copy and original cataloging and other projects such as weeding, and discards. For example, last March was a high number of discards. Well, it's 2,000 and over 2,400 discards in preparation for the RFID. Other tasks, interlibrary loans, there can be requests for us to send the item, or also requests to borrow an item from our patrons. Other tasks, there's like a fix-it shelf. Items that need to be relabeled, records checked, modified. There's also weeding, handling discards, basically making sure everything is correct and accurate. We work with the vendors. Here are some vendors we work with. Our main one being Baker and Taylor, Overdrive, EBSCO, Recorded Books. We just started working with Midwest Tapes because they have the Disney movies now, which Baker and Taylor used to have. So we're also aware of the licensing issues that may occur. And lastly, we are the first ever in the nation to use Enrich EDI, electronic data invoicing, in the acquisitions model in COA. Like we are the forerunners in this acquisitions model in COA. And when I did go to the technology interest group at CLA, we were discussing different systems, so it seemed like we are like one of the few that uses this system. So as we get to know it better, we're becoming more knowledgeable about the ins and outs of COA. And lastly, I just want to say we take everything very seriously in technical services. We really want to get the patron the items they want, and we want to be offering like the hottest movie and all the popular books that everybody wants. So we take our jobs very seriously. Thank you.
Can I have a few questions? Is that time for questions on this? Carlene, before you go, I noticed in the interlibrary loan part that you discussed, it seems like we give more than we get. It sounded like we lend more than we borrow. And I wonder how our patrons find out about that service. Is it sort of incidental that they're looking for something and they find out at the desk that there's an ability to get things from other libraries? Or would there be a way to promote that a little bit more so our patrons know that that's a service that we offer?
Yeah, usually it would be at the desk when they can't find the item or we don't have the item. They could either offer, we usually offer, would you like to request the item to be purchased, or pay the $150 for the interlibrary loan. So usually we do promote it whenever we don't have the item, because you don't want them to leave empty-handed, so we offer them something.
I just wonder if there's any way for people to find that out besides being told by a person at the desk. I don't know if it comes up in the catalog or if it's listed anywhere as a service.
Usually, I don't think ILL is that prominent, but they can suggest something through their account when they're online. So that's more like suggest a purchase or put an item on hold, and then we check the hold ratio. If it gets to the point where there's a lot of hold, and then we'll get another copy of the book. So we're always checking that.
I believe when you search through the catalog, though, if we don't own it, I believe there's a piece that does say it's available through ILL.
I've never
I
noticed
think
that.
I've seen that.
But also, yeah, if there's like item that's, I also check what titles are gonna be requested, like what's popular. If it's something really obscure that somebody wants, we might not get it. But if it's like something that a lot of people are wanting and always requesting, then we're gonna add it to our collection. So I check that too.
And I had a question too, Arlene, regarding the PIP. Those are the books that are purchased at the request of patrons, right?
Yeah.
So I had no idea that there's been over 2,000 in the last, well, it sounds like less than 3 years, right?
Yeah, it's really picked up because they promote that a lot at the desk. If you want to get it, then we can just order it for you because we're accepting most of the PIPs unless it's like out of print or something.
Yeah, and having been through that myself on a book that I requested, it went pretty quickly, and I had the feeling that the book had been, very well vetted before you actually added it to the collection and so on. But, so you just see that ramping up, it's getting more and more popular, is that what I'm hearing? You're doing more every month, let's say?
Yeah, like one weekend, one Monday I got back, and after the weekend there was like 60. I was like, ooh, wow, that was a lot.
Yeah. And then another question about our collection, 73,000 here at the branch, and Stella, I remember talking to you, and it's like a refresher for me. We culled about 50 or 60,000 titles, didn't we, in the last few years? I mean, we brought gotten rid of a lot of the titles. You talked about that before.
Yeah, I know that before I started working here, I believe there was about 20,000 that were culled at one point. And then during my time since I was here with the renovation and the reduced shelving, we did have to cull some additional amounts. But again, in more recent period, what we're trying to do is just make sure that, we're keeping a current collection and making sure that we have a broad breadth of subject matter across the board, whether that's for children, adults, kids.
Okay. And then just one last question, because it helps my understanding of the operations. So with the electronic systems that we have now to track books and so on, Does it also give out a report about which books are just sitting there and not being used, and it kind of leads you to them to say, okay, maybe we do need to get rid of this because the use has been so low, okay.
Yeah, there's different reports and analytics you can use to determine what is possible to be discarded from the collection.
Okay, good, thanks.
And just the 73,000 is just what we have hard copy, right? That doesn't include the numbers that were reported last month on our electronic, what we have access to electronically, right?
I don't know.
I would have to check,
The-
with Christopher, because he gave me the number.
Okay.
I think the total items, I think it includes the electronic.
Yeah, the number we gave you last month, and I think that's the number we gave you, it included all formats.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks so much. Next, we're on to Staff Association history from Uni. Uni LaFontaine.
Okay, let me give you guys a
Thank
couple
you.
of samples.
Thank you.
Just during the agenda pause.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be pretty brief. My name is Uni LaFontaine, and I'm just wanting to tell you guys a little bit about the Staff Association and who we are. I'm the president of the Staff Association, by the way. The Staff Association was started in 1974. Pardon me if I read my notes instead of look at you guys. The purpose of the Staff Association in 1974, as they wrote it, was to promote staff welfare and feeling and fellowship among staff members, to maintain close cooperation with the district librarian and board of trustees in all library policies. The district librarian would be the director. And to further the interests of the staff in the library profession, and to assist in making the library an effective agency in the community. All staff members, except for the district librarian, were eligible to be members in 1974 when they first began. This has been revised since then. By June of 2011, this exception was revised to read the district director, public services manager, and HR finance director. Thanks. Membership dues in 1974 were $1 per quarter. Things have changed.
Things have changed.
And that was, they were due in January, April, July, and October. Those dues were used for a variety of things. The Staff Association consisted of committees, and they had a social committee, so a lot of those dues were used to throw birthday parties, and they also worked together to create their Christmas party. They voted on where they went to and have their Christmas party. It also had a staff relations committee. They worked on staff issues and communication with the district. A staff room committee, so clean the staff room. So what fell under Staff Association was a wide range of things, from social activities to basically collective bargaining. Moving ahead in the 80s, for example, in January of 1982, due to budget cuts, the staff did not get the requested cost of living increase, but they did increase their contribution. The library did increase their contributions to the insurance medical premiums and granted additional holiday time. So the staff was very appreciative of that, and that's how they ended up with December 24th as a day off. In 1984, I included a copy of some of the minutes there for you guys to see, so you have a general idea of some of the discussions that were happening. Again, they discussed everything from people having birthdays and things that were happening around the library, whether it be maintenance or things happening with the patrons or concerns about staff welfare and medical, dental, things like that. By October 1988, the staff wrote a letter over their concerns about the asbestos removal that was happening in the library at that time, not only for their own health concerns, but also regarding the concerns for the health of the patrons. The association has always had service to the community and regard for the Altadena Library patrons as their first priority. And we see this reflected in how their letter that they signed to the district regarding maybe wanting to close or post signs for the patrons because the asbestos removal was a deep concern for everyone. Later in 1988, our own Michelle Hoskins was the president of the Staff Association, and the Staff Association has had a variety of presidents, including Vicki and Michelle and Sue and many more people. Earthquake preparedness is what was on their mind at that time, so we see that they, again, it was not just simply a group of people who came together to complain about issues, but they were very proactive about seeing things done in the library. In 1992, the staff agrees to forego their cost of living increase in support of the library during a time when there were severe budgetary issues all through Los Angeles County and the state of California. The staff agreed to do this because they understood that this is what was needed for the library, and they've always wanted to work closely with the library to do the best thing for this community. The Staff Association in 1993 again agreed to forego a cost of living increase, but they did request the day after Thanksgiving become a holiday for them. So there was a lot of give and take between the district and the Staff Association. By 2003, the Altadena Library District Staff Association added a salary committee, and they did this to research salaries and other libraries that were similar size district and similar size libraries. And they've always had a lot of ad hoc committees like this, whether to research benefits or salary, or even to throw birthday parties. This has always been a part of the Staff Association. Moving forward, the Staff Association has always had a pretty genial relationship with the district and with the director, and while there were some times of turmoil that we all have gone through, our biggest hope is to continue having a genial relationship with the district and with the director, and always to keep the lines of communication open. And we feel that, now that everybody's moving forward with things, that we would like to see that continue, and we hope that we can find a way to keep on working to improve communication and be an essential voice in this community and in this library. Thanks.
Thanks, Judy. Just a quick question from me, and it might be in here, I haven't read the whole thing. Well, how often do you elect officers for the association? Because Carlene, weren't you the president a while back? Yeah, so I'm just wondering, does that happen once a year, or is it sort of?
Sometimes officers, it usually is once a year. Sometimes officers step down before their year is done, such as Carlene did step down before a year was done. So, but usually it is, yes.
Okay. Great, and thanks for that little history too. That's very interesting. Any other questions? Okay. All right, that brings us to financial reports, and that will be, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, that brings us to Cindy.
Thank you. Sorry, I went out of order. So I first, this is my last board meeting, so I do want to thank the trustees for your continued support throughout my 8 months here. It's been a pleasure working for Altadena. It was a surprise coming here after retiring, after 38, almost 40 years in Glendale to come and have the experience of a new library. And it's just to be here in this time of transformation and transition. It's just been an incredible experience for me. And I'm really thrilled that Nikki Winslow is going to be your new director. She's in the audience right now, and we are all eagerly awaiting her arrival. I have been sending her ongoing communication about what all the things that are upcoming, her schedule, and keeping her up to date with the most current programs and services and things that she's going to be doing in her tenure to begin with. So I think she's getting pretty well prepared for coming on board, and I know she's really excited to be here, or to be coming here. I also, in in the packet, there's a listing. One of the things that we spent a considerable amount of time working on was looking at policies and job descriptions. And once we tracked everything down, and it took quite a bit of time, and thanks to Nicole and Kylan and Stella for helping me with this. Once we tracked everything down, I thought it would be useful to give Nikki and the trustees a list of policies that are in existence, some of which have not been approved by the board, some of them have been approved by the board, and then based on some review of other library systems, including the one that I came from, Glendale, but also 2 district libraries, Palos Verdes and Buena Park, or Placentia, recommended policies to be looking at in the future, because we really, I mean, my recommendation, my parting words are, you know, the district really needs a solid policy manual in many different areas. And so I thought it would be useful for everyone to have this list. And then it also lists all the job descriptions and the dates that they were approved by the board. So some of them are very out of date, but that was one of the reasons that we wanted to hire Coughlin Associates to take a look at all of our jobs, or our classifications. So this is for your edification, and hopefully it will help you moving forward. On the other note, I'd just like to thank the foundation for their support. Bridget and the board have also been very supportive of me. They co-sponsored the grant to the community foundation, and we're thrilled that we got that. And Taste of Vina, I'm so sorry that I missed it, but thank you.
We'll have a glass of wine.
Okay, and then also the Friends, of course, I've so enjoyed working with them. The dedication of both groups is just superb. You're very lucky in a district of this size to have so many committed people to the organization. And I do want to, they are contributing $7,800. That was the new donation that they've approved, and it's primarily focused on the chamber series, new chamber series, which will be fantastic, but also children's materials. But I also want to say, the original request that they approved will include, and this was Trustee Khan actually suggested this, that we promote or sponsor a One Book, One City. So the Friends have given us, in that tremendous contribution, $3,000 toward One Book, One City program, and the staff is already starting to plan that. So I'm really excited about that, and I definitely will participate as a member of the public. Christopher is working on 2 RFPs. One is on an emergency alert and public announcement system that can also be used as a PA or a PA system for our second Saturday and other events. So that's going to be out on the street, so to speak, soon. And an interior or surveillance camera system to increase the number of cameras that we have in the main library. Actually, add them. I don't think we have any at the moment. On the training note, Nikki and Nicole will be attending California Public Employers Labor Relations Association Annual Training Conference, and I thought this was really important for both of them, since we've given up HR Network, and Nicole's added responsibilities, and Nikki coming in without having overseen an HR department before. I thought that would be very useful for them, so they'll be attending that. And Kylan will be attending the CSDA Secretary Clerk Conference, also in November. We are thrilled, on the personnel note, to introduce Jesse Lopez, who's here in the audience tonight. I just want to read a little blurb because his credentials are so impressive. He's beginning his new position as an adult services manager today. Welcome aboard. Jesse comes to Altadena with an impressive background, which includes a BA in history from UC Santa Barbara and an MLIS, Master's in Library and Information Science from Wayne State. His most recent position was with Arizona State University, where he served as Director of Learning Services, overseeing a staff of 55 people across 4 campuses. He's fluent in Spanish and has a wide range of interests, including oral history programs, which perked up my ears when we interviewed him, along with all the other things he told us. He's fluent in Spanish and has a wide range of interests that he brings brings to this district. So we're thrilled to introduce Jesse. And before becoming a librarian, he served in the United States Marine Corps as a Spanish cryptolinguist, and you'll have to explain to us exactly what that means, but it sounds very impressive. He's a native of the San Gabriel Valley, and welcome once again. And we are also welcoming Cindy Teolia, who was recently hired as our library associate in the children's room at the main library. She recently completed a 10-month fellowship at the Brooklyn Public Library, where she assisted with literacy and immigrant programs. She is now going for her MLIS from San Jose State, and she is just relocated from New York to our area. And finally, Ben Eisen recently accepted the position as library page. His former kind of fun things that he did was he was a performing artist, or maybe he still is, in music and acting, and we're really happy to welcome Ben to us as well. We have one other position, the Children and Family Services Manager position, and that recruitment is ongoing. We're competing, I think, with 3 or 4 other library systems that are recruiting for the same position, and so we have not had a robust number of candidates applying for that job, but we do hope that we will be getting some new candidates from the CLA recruitment that we did. So that concludes our report.
All right, thank you, Cindy. Any questions for?
Sorry, did you just want to mention the special meeting date?
Did you want me to?
If you would,
I'd
please.
be happy to. So we are going to, there's a series of meetings related to the strategic planning process with the community meeting and with staff, and then the town hall meeting, and we thought it would be fruitful to, once those meetings were over, although there is a draft strategic plan in the packet tonight, once the further input was gathered from those 3 entities, to have yet another special meeting with the trustees before the final approval in November. So the tentative, or not tentative, I think we will have this meeting on November 6th at 7 o'clock here in the main library. So November 6th, 7 p.m., we will have a special meeting for everyone to give us more input. We've certainly gathered a lot, but we always appreciate as much input as we can get on the draft plan.
All right, thanks, Cindy. Now, the next report is from the financial reports, and that would be Unico.
So these are the financial statements for August, and the only thing that I really want to highlight is a couple of revenue items. So we took in over $13,000 in passports for the month of August, which is a great number for them, so shout out to Tony and Natalie. And then we did get over $58,000 in property tax revenue, so that was a nice little bump for us. I also have a note, I finally have dates for the audit. The auditors will be here November 25th and 26th to do their final field work, so that the audit will hopefully be ready by the end of the year. And I apologize, my reports look different this time. I was recently converted to a Mac, so everything changed.
Just a couple of questions I had, not necessarily financial, but just you're wondering, as I look at the report, the P&L report that has our budget and how we're doing against the budget and so on, there's an item for book 6120, and we had $130,000 in our budget for books. And this is kind of a rhythm question for me, because we've already spent more than half of that. And so I just wondered, is that the way it kind of generally goes, that there'll be a lot of money expended right at the beginning of the year, and then things tail off after that?
That number tends to fluctuate, actually. We're on a 45-day billing cycle with Baker & Taylor, who is our primary book vendor, and because I pay with a credit card, the amounts show up even a month after that. So those figures actually include June and July, which is why they're so high. So
Okay.
some of it actually belongs to last fiscal year and will be journaled back.
So I guess the follow-up question is, we're not worried as an institution that we're gonna run out of money for books here before you, I'm looking more at Stella than you on this.
Not at all.
Okay. All right, good. Are there any other questions regarding the budget? One thing I did notice, and I was double checking, I didn't have that wrong, is that when you look under legal expenses, which we're all in the habit of looking at. in the
Flip
last
right
few
to
months, there's nothing there, but it's simply because you haven't coded that stuff yet, right?
Yes.
Just for that.
So I believe I got the 2 bills for July and August and September.
Okay.
So that's when they.
This is
will go.
coming, but we just
Yes.
don't see it yet, all right? And then I will, I guess, talk a little bit more regarding the budget committee report that we have, but did I hear you say the 25th and the 26th, so the 2 days that the auditors are coming for last year, is that right?
Yeah, that was the earliest date I could get.
Okay, great, thank you. That'll help with the planning for that meeting. All right, no more questions? Great, thanks, Nicole, appreciate it. And the next committee report actually would be me, and that is the budget committee, and as usual, waiting for a date for the audits and so on. I think it's a fortuitous time to have a budget committee meeting beginning of December or late November, because it will dovetail nicely into what's happening with the facilities committee. And we'll start to get a handle on exactly what our expenditures are expected to be for work that we need to do here and so on, and be able to build into that some sort of a plan for how we might finance it and so on. So this will be a good time. We'll run it as a special meeting for, the budget committee meeting. It'll be open to the public, et cetera. And I'll get the dates for that scheduled as soon as I can. All right, next because we've moved up 6, or E3, I should say, sorry, I jumped in there, but the strategic planning committee, I'll let Katie go next.
Okay. A lot of stuff to tell you guys. So we are in the sort of most intensive bit of the strategic planning process. We are in our sprint to the finish line. So basically where we are is we have gathered as much evidence as we can for this phase of operations. Now, obviously, continuing to get community input and continuing to gather evidence is going to be an ongoing process that happens throughout the entire year for the rest of time, right? That's going to be something that as a library we commit to doing really well, and not just as part of a strategic planning process, but at a certain point in a strategic planning process, we have to say, okay, now we got to write something. So now we're at the now we got to write something phase. So we've had our town hall, we've had a number of sort of focused meetings with the Friends, with the Foundation, with the town council. All of you guys did your one-on-one interviews. We had an online survey, which at last, I think we have 120 something responses. I think probably more than that by now. So a lot of information there, and we'll get all of this information to you guys in an interesting form so you can actually digest all of it, and all of it will be public, right? So, and then we're coming into our final phase. So what you have in the packet today is a draft of the strategic plan. Obviously, it will look much prettier than this ultimately, but this is the core of what we're looking at. So the goal is to get this to you guys and to get it out publicly so that everybody has a chance to look at it for a week or two. And then we're gonna have a series of sort of final reaction meetings, basically, starting next week. So next Sunday will be the final meeting for the strategic planning committee in this iteration, and they're gonna, look at the draft, react to it, talk about some of the higher level questions, so things like mission, vision, core values, sort of big picture stuff, as well as talk about ways in which we can set up sort of consistent community feedback loops so that after we say, okay, the strategic planning committee is done, we don't just shut it down, but things continue to, those lines of communication that we work so hard to build stay open. On Monday, as you know, the library is closed in the morning, and we'll have an all-staff meeting and then a leadership meeting. And what we'll be doing there is looking at the strategic initiative part of the document that you have. So what are in there right now, I've tried to put notes in where there are bits that are coming and bits that are for real. So in the one in your packet, if you look all the way down at page So it's page 12 of the document, page 47 of your packet. What we've done is we've taken the core values that we came up with in our community group as well as in the staff group, and we've mapped a series of initiatives onto those values. So, for example, when we say, okay, we as a library district really care about equity, what does that mean? Well, equity means having facilities that everybody can access, right? That's a core component of actually articulating a value that we care about. So most of these strategic initiatives could fit under multiple things, right? But what we're going to be doing with the staff on Monday is going through and kind of paring these down into very focused and hopefully somewhat achievable big picture goals. After our strategic planning work concludes, what will happen then, and this is sort of a jump ahead in time, so I'm sorry for that, but in like, you know, late November, early December, Nikki, the leadership team, the staff will start putting together an implementation plan, right? So when we say, okay, we have a strategic initiative to, for example, be a whole lot better at communicating with our community, right, across every single demographic. What does an implementation plan for that look like? What are the specific things we're going to do to actually articulate that initiative? So the strategic initiatives that'll be in the plan are fairly high-level goals, and then we'll have a lot of different, you know, quite granular and tactical choices we can make across various different programs and choices and plans that will get us there. So that's what we're going to do with the staff on Monday night. So that's Monday, November 4th. Thank you. Monday, November 4th, we have our final town hall meeting. So we've got this out in the packet. We're going to try to get it out as widely as we can online. And so we're going to ask anybody who would like to react to this draft document, who has any thoughts. Maybe they look at it and they think, yes, this is totally right, or no, we're missing something really important, or, you know, anything basically in between. We would really like for them to come and share their thoughts with us, or if they can't make it, to, you know, to get those reactions to us. And then the final piece of all of this will be the piece that we do as a board, and that will be our special meeting on Wednesday night, where we go through kind of the same process. And I believe Margaret's going to be at so Margaret's going to be, Margaret Sullivan, our strategic planning consultant, will also be at the board meeting. And so she'll be able to talk a little bit about some of the larger picture process. We'll be able to talk about some of the specifics. By that point, we will have the strategic initiatives from the staff. So we'll have a new iteration of this even for you guys by then. And we'll talk about it and we'll debate it. And if there are things we want to change or think about differently, we can do that. And then all of that will get wrapped into a final package that goes into the board package for the November meeting, and hopefully we can wrap it up. Yep. So that's where we are. It's a lot of stuff. There are a lot of moving parts, but we're getting really, really close.
That's good work, the two of you. Thanks a lot for that. That's a big job.
It is.
You're gonna volunteer for the committees with less work.
Tell me if you can't hear me out there. My mic might be out here. Well, thanks for that update. I am really looking forward to the meeting itself. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fascinating. And I think, you know, the thing that I would just say, sort of forecasting, is, you know, there's a lot of stuff in this draft document about basically why we're doing what we're doing and the rationale behind all of it. And I think that's really important, and it's really important that as a board it resonates with all of us. So, you know, if there's anything in there that you feel like is not representative or is not working for you or is not articulating why we're doing what we're doing as an institution, I think it's really important to bring that to the table. So please feel free to just like get in there, because we want something that everybody feels like they can get behind 100%.
May I just add, I don't think you mentioned this, Katie, but because most of the meetings are here at Maine, at the town hall on Monday night, the 4th, will be at Bob Lucas at 6:30.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on something I heard in a session at CLA that rang in my mind with this process, and that was I don't even remember which session it was, but they were talking about the idea of having mission and vision and values statements, and sort of jokingly, the presenter said, you know, raise your hand if you know the mission of your organization. And of course, most people didn't. But there were several libraries represented in that session who talked about, and this is, to me, is almost like the post-strategic planning process, where there's a mechanism whereby all the ideas that happen later and beyond get mapped back to this. And so it's almost like if you have an idea for an adult program, or if you have an idea for a children's program, or if you have an idea for any kind of a community event or anything, it's part of the process of planning is to really identify where it, how that future idea is mapping back to the plans that were made. So it's not just this thing that we did at this period of time and, looking forward to the things that are planned directly as a result of it, but that the danger is, which I don't think we're in a very big danger of, is that things like this become dead.
Right.
They become the thing in the binder that goes up on your shelf and that you don't ever use again. I think the trick will be to keep the mission and vision and values and plans a living document that's constantly in use, as a handbook almost.
I think that's totally right. I mean, there are some institutions that even blow up their mission, their vision, and their core values like as big things, and when they have meetings, they put them in the room so everybody kind of is
Remember.
quite literally faced with them, right? And you're absolutely right. So figuring out, when we're undertaking future plans, doing things, it's not just a mechanism, I think, for us to say, how does this fit in, but it's also a mechanism sort of for the community to hold us accountable, to say, okay, well, you said you cared about, this thing, but like, how are you actually doing that? And, ideally, as an institution, we want to be able to say, well, here are the line items in the budget, and here are the specific programs, and here are the specific things we're doing that get to it. And if that's not working in a way that it should be, then that's a different conversation. But yeah, I totally agree with you.
Well done.
All right, thanks for that report. The next is Facilities Committee, and let Jason take that.
Perfect timing, just as we're getting ready to wrap up the strategic planning part of this, we're just barely getting kick-started on the facilities work. Before I kind of talk about any details, I want to just again thank Jonathan and his team for the work that they continue to do. Because every piece of the long list of to-dos that he knocks off, that him and his team take care of, is one less thing that we have to worry about on the rest of the facilities work. So thanks to Jonathan and his team. I also want to thank Cindy, who's been taking care of doing a lot of work with ARG to get us ready to go, especially while I was off the last 2 weeks. So thank you, Cindy. So a couple of specific meetings I want to just put out there and announce. I know we just talked about on November 6th, the full board doing a special meeting. But prior to that special meeting, the Ad Hoc Facilities Committee will be having our first face-to-face with ARG. So we can really start diving into some detail on this scheduled timeline and kind of figuring out some additional events that need to start being calendared. So that's going to be critical. Either November 18th or 19th, I believe we're leaning towards the 19th. At the Bob Lucas branch will be our first public town hall on the facilities led by ARG. So as soon as we have that completely set in stone with ARG, we will start our work with getting the word out to the community so that we can have as much participation as possible. The community participation in the strategic plan has been amazing. We want to keep that going with the facilities, as those two things are quite connected to each other. Contained in the board packet is a more broad plan. We've been looking at, ever since the beginning, and even most of the even responses we got to the RFP have been, minimum 12-week process, most of them looking at 16 weeks roughly. So if you look at this, by March, we will have a final document to go by, which is pretty exciting. I just want to kind of reiterate with folks as far as setting us up for expectations. This part of the process of getting all of our facilities up to date is really just getting us a roadmap for how to accomplish this work, right? So I don't want folks to be expecting that in March we're going to have these full detailed architectural plans and, ribbon cutting and groundbreaking ceremony.
Wouldn't it be
No,
great?
this is the roadmap, which is frankly more important because without this, there's virtually no way that we'll be able to get the funding piece of it and how to accomplish that together. Yes, Randy, question?
The 19th of November is Altadena Town Council.
Did he say 19th or 18th? I thought
Unless
he
you're
said
gonna have
19th.
He said Town Council starts at 7 in the evening. So I
Did
just
you-
thought I'd let you know.
No, I appreciate that.
19th is to... What date did he say? The 18th, didn't he?
I heard 19th,
Thank
but
you.
I think now he's gonna have to
Take
change.
a look at that before we announce anything to the entire world. And I think that's really it. I think it's just exciting that we finally have a timeline. We've got some dates set to really launch this. It coincides with Nikki formally joining us. We managed to get it moving forward before strategic plan is completely wrapped up. So I know we're still working on making sure that ARG is able to connect with Margaret Sullivan and her team, have some transition discussion there as well. So it's exciting times.
And I'll just jump in with a reminder, ARG stands for Architectural Resources Group, and we're very pleased with them so far. Of course, they haven't done anything yet, but their approach has been great, and the references are stellar. They did a lot of work at the Huntington Library, UCLA libraries, et cetera, and as I talk to people about them, they all say they're just a terrific organization. Plus, as you may recall, the project manager is from Altadena with children here too, so she's very connected to us as a library, and I think we've got that personal, approach
So
that
if
we.
there's something wrong, we know where to find it.
Exactly, yeah, right around the corner. So it's very exciting to be at this stage on the facilities. All right, any other questions? The next thing is the report on the California Voting Rights Act Committee. Okay. That was the briefest report I've ever heard Katie make. I had nothing. That's good. But I agree, that's something that we're not really going to get a handle on for a while. The next is trustee reports, and I'd like to start this off, if I may, with, I went to the CLA meeting, which was just terrific. Nikki was the co-chair of that, and I'm sure we're all going to talk about that in a few minutes here. But I'd like to start off with a recognition of Cindy while I've got the floor here. She's just done a terrific job, and a little hint of the respect that we as a board have for you, Cindy, came with Gwen the other day when she thought she was not going to be here for this meeting. There was a chance she might not make it. She texted me the thank you to read to you. Now she can do it in person. But she wanted to make sure that she was not going to miss the bus when it came to expressing her gratitude on the great job you've done here. You're one of a line of folks that Stella also did a terrific job. I would argue that there was a little bit more adjustments that were made under your tenure here in terms of infrastructure, which we really do appreciate because that's all stuff that most of us can't do. You did a terrific job, and I'd like the other members to chime in here. We have a little something for you that I'll present when we're done, but that's my thoughts about you in this position. You've really done a great job for us. We appreciate it. So Gwen, I'll start with you. You can read your thank you on your own.
Let me just say it, because Cindy we've been through some very rough times. But you were really a stabilizing factor, and how wonderful it was to work with you and to see how you engaged others in the process. Not alienating anybody, but really engaging everybody. And so I just want to say thank you so much, because the transition with you has been very smooth. And I looked at this, this handout that's in the report about the number of things that have been addressed. And it's a testament of the young people that we have, all of the, well, I call all of you young. I just think it's such a wonderful testament of you, and how you have engaged Stella, Kylan, members of the staff to really work hard to address some of the issues that we have had. And so I really do thank you so much for that.
You guys are gonna make me cry.
I really don't want to do that, because I'll be crying with you.
I'm an easy cry, so don't start with that.
Okay.
No, I just feel like there is nothing like a pro. I mean, we needed a pro, and we needed
We got it.
a steady hand. And I have all these images in my mind of what, I mean, when we think about a year ago, you know, it was rough seas. And I have this image of you in the back of the boat with your hand on the tiller, just like getting us all, I mean, all of us to just calm down and get back to work. And I would echo just the quantity of work that you have poured out as a part-time person is just astonishing. And I know for months and years to come, we will think back and thank you of all the things you have just righted and clarified and set up, you know, for further work. I mean, it's not like you finished it all. There will be a lot of work to be done, but I just feel like now we kind of know. Now we know what's on our plate, and you know, to help in easing Nikki's entry into our midst is a huge gift as well. So just from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really rare for an institution in crisis, which is certainly what we were, to find itself a year later in not just a stable position, but in a position where we actually have a game plan for the future. We know what we need to do, we know how we need to do it. We have a team that I think is more or less unified behind doing all of those things, and I think it's a huge testament to your leadership. I don't think we could have done this without you, and I don't know that we could have done it with anybody else. So we are really, really grateful to have had you at this moment when things could have really gone a different direction. And I think, you know, not just as a trustee, but I think, you know, there's an entire community of people who may never know that you were here, but they will know what you did. So thank you.
So I remember before even most of us were elected, almost exactly a year ago, there's a large number of us from the community that had been coming to meetings for about 6 months, some of us longer than that. And one of the conversations we had, you know, in the little huddles and the meetings after and the meetings in between is, you know, we're really glad that all of us are speaking up and doing all this stuff, but shoot, who the hell is going to want to take on this director position? And, you know, what are we going to do about that? You know, all this stuff had been in the media. There was an incredible amount of negativity on social media. And we just felt as if there's just no chance that we're going to be able to find anybody to take this on. And for the life of me, I'll never be able to figure out, especially why somebody chose to come out of retirement to take it on, knowing what it meant to take it on. But you know, the entire community owes you a debt of gratitude for taking on that role, taking on the leadership that we all needed. And you know, I don't think we'd be in a position of having Vicki joining us permanently either. which I'm sure will help us continue on this path. So, for myself, thank you.
So I have something, oh, go ahead. Yes.
I said a few words earlier, but I do, and this has gone through my mind many times in my 8 months here, and I've worked with a lot of elected officials in a city I won't name. But I have never come across a group of 5 people that are so dedicated to the mission of what we do. And that has made, it's made my job, and it will make Nikki's job so much easier. And so I truly, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for that passion and that kind of, we're gonna get this, we're gonna make this happen, and you guys are just amazing. And I think, without naming a city, I think just in general to have 5 elected officials that are really dedicated not to self-serving principles, but to the principles of the organization they serve is absolutely stunning. And so I really want to thank you for that. One of my favorite books, my pitch for the library, but one of the pitches for the Friends is a book called Quiet, and what it does, it confirms those of us who really consider ourselves introverts, and it confirms that it's okay to be an introvert, but one thing that's really difficult for us is taking praise. So, even though that's the case, I appreciate everything all 5 of you said. It really has made it, that's the icing on the cake for this experience, and it truly has been a really, really fulfilling and gratifying experience for me. So thank you.
And it would be remiss of me before I present to you what we have for you, not to thank the staff here too. Everybody's done such an amazing job. Eileen, Nicole, and then we've called out others in the audience tonight. Please express to staff when you talk to them how grateful we as a board are for what, the sort of voyage that we've all been on for the last few months with Cindy at the helm. It's a terrific group, and it's rare. It's a rare event to have this kind of a group feeling about what you do. I can tell you that. So congratulations to all. Cindy?
And I've been remiss too by not saying that, how the staff has been, they've been through hell and back, let's all admit that. And, the transformation that I've seen in the staff since the very beginning, in big part to your leadership and your support of them, has been phenomenal. And their support of me and, what we wanted to accomplish over the last couple months has really been a great experience. So, time too.
Okay, none of us are crying, so I'm going to give you this. Just by way of background, Cindy is either has or is about to collect a new puppy, so we have a little something in here.
Oh my gosh.
So you thought you were retiring, but now you have another job.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And Government Relations Liaison, which is going to be Betsy, report from her.
Sure, and when I talked with Kylan and Cindy about where to put this, we decided to put it under trustee report. So I have the report for that, but then I have a couple other things under my trustee report that I'd like to just mention. A number of months ago, Terry appointed me as the Government Relations Liaison, and honestly, I haven't done anything about it until now. So I just spent some time this month really looking through stuff from the Special Districts Association, from CLA and ALA, to kind of roll up where things are at the moment legislatively as far as we know. We've all talked about the ACA 1 measure that we all know and are sorry that failed, which would have changed the proportion of votes needed to be able to pass a bond measure that would have been advantageous to us. On the front of my report, which is on page 51, is just a roll-up that I found on CSDA of things that passed through the governor's desk at the end of the legislative session that might have some effect on us. So I'm not gonna read them all, that's just there for your reference, but these are things that, not everything that you find on CSDA has anything to do with libraries. A lot of it is water and all those other kinds of special districts that we have. I did go, on page 52, I talk a little bit more about library-related things, and I did go to the meeting of the legislative committee at CLA, and heard a lot about, they've sort of updated their priorities. These are the ones that are listed on this website right now, but I think they're gonna be slightly amended with the beginning of their post-conference year. But this is kind of the things that the California Library Association is focused on. They do, of course, have lobbyists on that are in Sacramento working to promote and further library interests. And I'll bring you more information about that as it happens. There is an annual event. I don't know if our board has ever participated in Day in the District, which is something that happens every spring, where library advocates all over the state take a day and go visit their local legislators in the district, not in Sacramento. The date has not been determined yet, so I'll keep you posted on that, but there may be an opportunity for a group of us, and not just trustees, of course, but community members and other advocates from our support groups, or even patrons who might be interested to go, would have the opportunity to go and share with our representatives the ways in which, we see on the ground what libraries do. There's a little bit of a summary of federal funding that is what we hear about, and I put in here that thank you letters have been sent. I haven't done that yet, but I'll be sending a letter to our senators and our congresswoman thanking them, because they were all on the list, of course, of legislators who signed letters supporting the federal legislation that supports libraries. I did hear one little something at CSLA about funding in the governor's budget for early learning in libraries. There's apparently $5 million in his upcoming budget for that. That may be what's coming up in the kind of local cooperative initiative that we've been hearing about, that our staff is involved in. But that's a pretty good sign that our governor is willing to earmark that amount of money for a library-related program like that. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave you with legislative information. I also did want to say, I guess this would be just under a more general trustee report, that I had an extensive conversation with Cindy, and have been in touch with Terry as well about the onboarding process for Nikki coming on. And we've talked about, in our previous meetings, that we want to have a process set up for periodic evaluation before we get to the year mark. And so I just want to kind of firm up that idea that we should plan on having an evaluation, sort of, again, a periodic evaluation, which would fall in the February meeting at the 3-month mark, and then the May meeting for the 6-month mark. And I've been doing a lot of reading about onboarding of a new director and the evaluation process. And Terry, of course, is already, planning to meet with Nikki in the first couple weeks of her after her arrival. And so I'm going to suggest that at our next meeting, we have an agenda item where we can really clarify, based on the discussion that you two have, sort of what our goals and expectations are for that, at least for that February meeting, if we can flesh it out for a 6-month mark as well, just for us all to bring what we feel are the priorities that we think are important that Nikki and her staff focus on, just so that things are super clear and well laid out. I've Cindy mentioned the possibility that she might be able to help with a template of an evaluation kind of form. I've reached out to Paul Kimura, and have not heard back from him yet, but he may be able to help with that. And I could certainly offer to kind of gather what Cindy might offer, what Paul might offer, other things that I'm finding online, to at least create a draft of an evaluation, like a template. So I'll bring that to the next meeting as well. So.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Oh,
Betsy.
before I give up the mic, can I just say a few things about my experience at CLA?
Yeah, I realized I got the cart before the horse
Yeah.
there a little bit. I should have given everybody a chance to do your regular trustee report.
Yeah.
And I know a lot will be comments about the CLA meeting that we just all went through, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'll just start since I have the mic right now. I was able to be there for 3 full days. And so the California Library Association, the statewide Professional Association of Libraries, met in Pasadena at the Convention Center. As was mentioned before, Nikki was the chair of the convention and of the convention, and it was just like clockwork. It was a really awesome event. I've been to a lot of conferences, and not all of them are like that. But first of all, I just want to express gratitude that the district funded my attendance. I just felt like I have so much to bring back, and it was only day before yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to write up all of my thoughts and notes about how it might affect what we do here, but I'll just list off an example of the kind of sessions that I went to. The first one that I went to was about disaster response, which given what's happening right now, the librarians who presented were from Napa and Butte County, where Paradise is, and Thousand Oaks and Ventura County, and they were expressing how they were kind of experiencing a little bit of PTSD right now at CLA this time of year, a year ago and 2 years ago, at this exact time of year, were when those tremendous fires and disasters were happening all over the state, just like they are right now. And I felt like I have a lot of thoughts to clarify and write down and bring back. For example, Michaela was there too, by the way, and so she and I can both bring back some of our impressions about it. And I mean, I'm pretty sure we have a disaster response plan. I don't know how old it is, but one thing a lot of people talked about was, it's one thing to have a disaster response plan for what do you do if your library floods and the books get wet, or what do you do if your library burns and the books burn, but what do you do if your library's fine, but the town you live in is burning or flooding or whatever, and you become de facto, and as we should, an information hub, because that's what we already are and what we already do. So a lot of the librarians were just both kind of frustrated and amazed at how that's just not always what people automatically think of in a time of a disaster. They're like, wow, we need this central place where everybody already goes, where there's a parking lot, and where there's Wi-Fi. It's like, hello, we have that already. So, a lot of what those librarians were talking about was just reminding all of the other players, and our situation is so unique because of being a district. It's not like we reach out to our mayor or our police chief. I mean, we have a different set of actors, but we just need to make sure that all of those players, and they kept saying, do it now, do it now, do it now before you need it, are really super hyper aware of the library as an active player in that kind of an event. I went to another session about advocacy. This was one of the 3-hour sessions on Thursday, and I had never heard of everylibrary.org. I don't know if you guys have. I'm sure Nikki has, probably Cindy has, but it's a PAC. It's a political action committee for libraries, and they do all their work pro bono, meaning for free. And the way they fund themselves is through the vendors. So, the people like Baker and Taylor, whose name was mentioned here in Carlene's presentation, I mean, all the people who sell us stuff in order to do our job have a huge stake in our survival. And they were the sponsors of the conference too. And so they fund this PAC, and this PAC can turn around and give you advice about doing a bond measure, or getting public input about how to look ahead toward a parcel tax and so on. So I was very excited to hear about that as a possible partner and helper in the work that we're going to be doing towards the parcel tax over the next couple of years. I'll try to make the rest of it brief because it was also amazing. I went to a program about learning circles, which was a way for adults who all have a common interest in something to get together and be co-learners for online learning. And it was cast as a way to provide sort of enhanced services to adult literacy students or English language students, but it doesn't need to be just that. People who have any kind of a common interest could get together in the library and do an online course together. I saw a lot of potential in that. Another interesting one I went to was the idea about how do you really create a reading culture in your library, and our friends are so far out ahead on that with the idea of the book pitch party, as we're so excited about all the technological things we're doing and all the future looking things we're doing. I think a lot of our patrons and we have a stake in really hanging on to the idea that reading and literature are a core part of our identity and what we want to help promote. I went to a cool thing about podcasting, which Michaela said has been something has been thought about around here, but nobody's ever really been able to have the bandwidth to add it in as a possible activity. The librarian that I heard talk about that does podcasts with like 10-year-old kids in her library who Skype with authors and then make a podcast about it that they post on their website. Couple of interesting ones about immigrant assistance. I was so excited to hear about our new library associate who's had experience with immigration programs. I think that's going to be a huge thing, and especially another one about the census, how we can really be involved in making sure that the count is good on the census. So it was a fabulous experience. It was amazing. I know other trustees were there, and somehow I never crossed anybody's path, which is kind of cool because it meant that we were all doing different things, so we all have different things to bring back. But I feel really re-energized, and just like my brain and plate are full of lots of cool things to think about for us this coming year. So thank you, Nikki. Good job.
No report.
I always have it. I always feel like I do this, which is not the best, so there we go. So very briefly, I also had the opportunity to go to CLA and was blown away by how great it was. Nikki, how long do I have to get all my slides from the app? Because I want to just download everything. Does it go away at a certain point?
They're gonna send a link that you can have everything
Okay.
in one click.
I gotta do that. So it was incredible, and I saw a different disaster session about earthquake preparedness and too many different interesting things to kind of list out here. But I was so impressed, and I especially loved the sort of connectivity part of it, where I could flip through slide decks and notes from presentations that were at conflicting times or that I couldn't make it to, and that was really cool as well. I want to use my time tonight to talk a little bit about the item on the agenda that we were going to hear about earlier, about PUSD school closures. Yeah, so here we go. So here's the thing. In late September, the Pasadena Unified Board voted to close 3 elementary schools as part of their school consolidation plan. They're shutting places down because they can't afford to keep everything open. And one of the schools that was on the list is Franklin Elementary, which, as you guys all know, was one of our fabulous Altadena Elementary Public Schools right behind our Bob Lucas Library. And it's just heartbreaking, right? So there's been a whole lot of agitation since then, not just from the community at Franklin, but from people who are invested in public education all over town saying, is there anything we can do? And I wanted to kind of update you guys on where all of that is and how the library might potentially be a partner in that process. So PUSD has been very close-mouthed about what exactly their budgetary constraints are. Initially, they said, well, to keep an elementary school open, we need $350,000. And then they said at a subsequent meeting, well, it's a number that's somewhere between $350,000 and $1 million, which is all the numbers. So it doesn't seem like there is a particularly clear dollar amount that they're working through. It seems more likely to be the case that Franklin, which has traditionally been under-enrolled and has traditionally also been enrolled with many, many students of color, was top of the list and only narrowly kind of escaped this fate last year. So where does the library come in? Well, there's a group of interested community donors who have basically said, you know, we tried to keep Cleveland open and couldn't do it, and we're not gonna lose another public school in Altadena. And so I've been talking with them, and they seem to feel pretty confident that they could come up with the initial $350,000 for the first year as a sort of stopgap measure. The town council, last year, when Franklin was in a similar position, went to bat and said, we're behind this, we think there are ways that the community can get more invested. And so where we are now is a position where I think, you know, the library could really come in as sort of an 800-pound gorilla if we are interested in being a real partner. One of the things that, you know, has been floated for years is, you know, the proximity of Bob Lucas and Franklin in terms of sort of facilities overlap. And I think, you know, something that we should think really seriously about is the potential for activating, you know, what I think we could think of like as a community school model. The idea that Franklin would become a hub not just for elementary public school education, but for public education for Altadena residents of all ages. So that means early childhood, you know, early literacy stuff, certainly elementary school stuff, teens, young adults, possibly adult education, skills development, job training things. What exactly the contours of this look like, I think it's, you know, gonna take some time to flesh out. My personal recommendation, and I hope that maybe we can put this on the November agenda to actually discuss it when we have some more information, and I can bring you back a little bit more certainty about whether or not the money that's on the table is really on the table, would be that, you know, if the library district is willing to say, yeah, we're behind Franklin as a public school and we think public education is important and we're willing to go to bat for that as a partner and figure out what it looks like, I think there's a pretty strong possibility that we could advocate for at least a 3-year stay from PUSD. Because at that point, there's really no downside for them. The budget issue is covered. It's kind of a no-risk scenario. And it would give us the time to explore, along with hopefully other community partners like PCC, like potentially other nonprofits in town, what we could actually put together. And I think it's worth exploring. So I wanted to bring that to you tonight. It is still in very early stages. Like I said, I'm talking with this group of donors. I'm talking with Dr. Stewart, who's the principal over at Franklin. There was an NBBA meeting. Granny, we were both there. So there are a lot of people who are like really invested in this and really interested. And so I wanted to bring it to you guys as soon as we had something at least semi-concrete.
So just by clarification here, when you would like this on the November agenda, it would be with more information, basically, and
Yeah.
a larger report on what's going on.
Exactly. So ideally, and I was hoping Jennifer would be here tonight, but maybe some cross wires on that. So yeah, in November, what I'd like to do is have, you know, a full proposal, maybe an intention or a resolution intention or something like that from us, and a really full description of like what we're looking at. I mean, I think the basic contours are we get a group of donors who can pony up the money for the first year. The second and third year are funded by grants until it becomes sort of a sustaining operation. And then PUSD wraps it back into their budget and they can take credit for what an amazing success it was, you know. But I think as an initial stopgap measure, finding basically community donors who are willing to pony up some money and community institutions who are willing to put some weight behind it is gonna be really key. So yeah, November agenda item would be a lot more detail, a lot more substantive information, but I also didn't want you to hear about this through the grapevine from somebody else.
Well, just a comment from me would be, was the speaker tonight involved with PUSD? Is she?
So yeah, Jennifer's town council.
And she's charged the education
Okay.
committee.
Correct, and the town council is on board to do whatever they can to keep as many Altadena public schools open as possible.
Yeah, for me, just for the record, I think, I'd love to hear more from an official school source or a PUSD source, because I think some of this is demographics too, just the shrinking number of kids and so on. And I don't feel like I personally have enough information about some of the building blocks of a school in terms of how it's attended and how many kids are needed to support it and that kind of a thing. I'm really unclear on that. So is that something that we could interject into this too?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'd be real interested in that.
And all that information is floating around. I didn't want to take up too much time tonight, but yeah, all that information is available. And I think it's really important that we get it all.
We'll make sure we
there,
get
so.
it on the agenda.
Okay, perfect. And then just the last thing here is I'm gonna apologize because I have to leave early tonight and I am so sorry, but I'm gonna be that guy. So, sorry.
No problem at all. Thanks for being here, Katie.
Just one piece I want to just add to the conversation around Franklin is I think there is a tie-in with some of the pieces of our strategic plan as far as making sure that we're communicating not only the value of public services, but what's actually being accomplished. And I think that's an area where public schools in general have failed miserably. There's a tremendous misconception that charter schools outperform public schools, which is a myth that's been dispelled by every study and statistic out there, but yet it still persists. And you can see it in all of the social media discussion around the PUSD issue, where you have parents that are actively advocating for public schools, but then still saying, well, until they're fixed, I still send my kids to the charter. and it's like, it just blows your mind. I mean, I think Altadena, we have 6 charters alone. And how many students is that pulling out? And for every one of those students, thousands of dollars in funding. And I think that's part of the issue too, because the answer, we've got to get ahead of that and make sure that the parents in the community know what's really happening in these schools, what's being offered, the programs, services, so that they're choosing to send their kids to public schools, which charters are not. That needs to be part of the conversation as well.
Yeah. And I think, in Pasadena, we have a situation where, like, as all of us know, Pasadena has a terrible history in public education. Especially on the west side, we're the only non-southern city to undergo federally mandated integration in the 70s. And a lot of the education decisions that have been made since then are just segregation policies under a new name. And Franklin falls squarely into the category of schools that traditionally have gotten the short end of the stick. So in terms of equity and diversity, there's a huge argument to be made there. Pasadena Public Schools, PUSD has 45% of school-aged children who would normally attend a public school who attend either private or out-of-district schools, which is one of the highest percentages, not only in the state of California, but in the nation. We fund our public schools at a lower rate, and we are not trying new things. And so I think, the opportunity we have here as a library district is to say, okay, well, we're invested in public education, we're invested in skills development, we're invested in, community partnerships. So what is it that we can bring to the table as a partner? So I have a lot of thoughts about this. Now I really have to go. Okay, for real.
Sorry, thanks. Thanks, bye. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Kate. See you.
Okay, now we are on on to unfinished business, and there's an update regarding art restoration from Cindy.
Yeah, in July, I think you recall that I brought forward an assessment of the George Simmons painting that hangs in the, above the Friends bookstore. And an appraisal was done on that piece, and in 2002, the value was $95,000. We recently had it evaluated by Lene Saunders, who's a conservator in the area, in the Los Angeles area, and she presented an estimate of $15,000 to $18,000 to restore it to its original splendor. We had some discussion at the meeting in July, and the direction was to bring it back for consideration of funding in the mid-year. Well, in the meantime, we have some really good news, because a donor, an anonymous donor, has stepped forward and donated $10,000 towards that restoration. The money now is in the foundation's hands with the agreement, a written agreement saying it will stay there until a decision is made about the restoration of the painting, with the thought that the district could support the balance and/or some kind of fundraising effort could happen. So what we're asking for tonight is just next steps, and how would you like the staff to proceed with this information?
So this isn't an action item you need from us, right? It's
No.
a discussion.
Do you want us to bring it back as a mid-year conversation?
I think it would be, if we were to tie this into the budget meeting and take a look at what excess funds we might have, or items that were, money that was not spent, et cetera, that, because we're talking about $5,000 to $8,000 more that's needed for that, right? And as I mentioned before, this is held as a non-depreciable asset for the library. I suspect, and you may have found this out already, that the amount of its value would increase with a good restoration significantly, and that gets carried on our books. I mean, it's not something we can, finance the lunch with at the meeting or whatever, but it adds to the value of the library to do this. So that was my thought, is that we would bring this up at the budget committee meeting and take a look and see if we've got some funds available for it, and just transfer that over there. Is that what you had in mind, Cindy? I mean, that was.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was the path you still wanted us to take.
Is there a time limit on the restoration fees here? For example, is she giving us 6 months to do this, or a year's time? Or it might, the cost of this, the restoration might increase?
That's a really good question, and I'm sure there's somewhere in her estimate that says this is good for X amount of time, but I would assume it would be at least a year.
I'm just wondering with the foundation, if there's a way that, I know that you keep talking about what we want to do and there are projects that need to happen. I'm just wondering if there's a way that the foundation might also incorporate some funding to assist with this. I think when I look at the budget, we're a little bit over budgeted. Isn't there a negative?
Yeah, it's a little hard to tell
Yeah.
now because a lot of our income hasn't come in and so on,
yes.
so but we will get
I'm
a line
just
of sight on
wondering
that.
if there might be some other options, and if they might even consider it. It's an idea, just throwing it out there like that.
Just the marketing potential of it alone is terrific.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could have a series of events about this that would draw people in and get people involved in the library.
And perhaps Bridget would like to bring that to her retreat as an option.
Perhaps.
And the two of you should know this, having been in charge of library and cultural activities for in your previous job, so you're the perfect ones to help us out on this. Is that enough discussion, or do you have any more that you'd like to bring in?
No, I mean, it looks like we're in a place where one way or another we'll be able to go forward with the restoration. I think we just need to have a plan to increase the visibility. Because until Renee brought this up at a past board meeting, there really wasn't much attention paid to this painting. Part of that is its location. So I just feel like if we're gonna make the investment, we also need to also have a plan for how we're gonna make the most of that investment. But I agree with the general approach of, you know, when we take a look at the mid-year, seeing what are the funding that exists. I mean, if we've got a generous community member putting in what looks to be, you know, as much as 2/3 of the cost, you know, we should be willing, if it fits within the budget, to cover the rest.
Maybe, can I just have a comment?
Sure.
You know, you mentioning the location, you know, how about if we moved it and put a box in front of it and said, if you want to help us restore this painting, put some money in the box. I mean, you know, you could, I mean, people will feel more of an attachment to the piece of art, if it's highlighted somewhere more visible, and if they're given the opportunity to help restore it. We don't need to decide that right now, but
It could be.
I just wish it was somewhere
And
where
it
we looked
might
at it
be
more.
that you might include that in the newsletter, that we're in need of donations for restoration, and see if you get some donors that way. You know, whatever way, I think it's important to just sort of throw out some ideas and see where they might lead. They may lead to somewhere.
Yeah, that gets the community involved, get some
Yeah,
ownership in it.
exactly.
So we'll bring this back at mid-year, but it sounds too like the direction is to either work with the Friends or the Foundation in some kind of drive
Yes.
that we can
Right.
manage.
Okay.
All right, good. Then review and approval of resolution 2019-09.
Okay, if you recall, at the last meeting, there was discussion and approval to go from Robert's Rules of Order to Rosenberg's Rules of Order, and then there was also discussion about, or presentation of a policy related to electronic records and email or electronic record retention. So both of those were approved at the last meeting, but what we needed to do next was we needed to incorporate it into board policies. So we worked with BB&K, who looked at, and Katie, as the person who was part of that committee, we looked at the board policies, and they gave us the suggested revisions to the board policies. The entire document is in your packet, since it is a revision, and somewhere here I have the page numbers, but the Robert's Rules of Orders changes are on page 74 through 75, and then the retention of electronic communications is on 81 through 82, 85, and 88. So it's pretty straightforward. What this resolution does is just incorporate those changes that we talked about last time into the board policies.
So we've already approved of all these things in pieces, now we're just saying, put it all in one package. Cool.
So we need an action item here, a vote to approve this, is that right, Cindy?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions then? All right, do I get a motion then to review and approve resolution 2019-08, the updates to our policies?
Also move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 That passes unanimously.
Terry, before we move on, could I make one request about this? Could you guys make us each one of these? Like, I don't want this to now get lost in my minutes. I would love to have like a stapled copy of this document to just have with me
Separately.
at each meeting.
Yeah, this one's red line, so we will, now
Okay.
that you've approved it,
Okay.
we will send you all
Thank you.
Good.
the final version.
And we are dropping C, right, Cindy?
Correct.
Okay, and we're on to D.
So this is another one related to what you approved last month. You approved moving forward with a transition from Chase Bank to Pacific Western Bank. And now what we need is a resolution to certify the signatories on that account. And in discussion with BB&K about this, because we weren't sure how to proceed, And in review of the policies, it turned out that there are some people in the last resolution we passed in March, which was with Chase Bank to confirm the signatories, that some of the people on there weren't officially approved by the board, and they're not officially in the policy. So what we need to do tonight is we need to rescind the resolution 2019-02, which is in your packet, that was approved in March. And we need to approve the certified corporate resolution for Pacific Western that is on the flip side. I do have a motion that was crafted by BB&K, if you'd like me to read it. A motion to rescind the district's March 2019 resolution authorizing district officials to act as signatories for district monies maintained by Chase Bank, to approve closing the district's banking accounts with Chase Bank, which you've done, but just to make that connection, and to approve Pacific Western Bank handling the district's banking needs, and the certified corporate resolution listing the district's authorized representatives for such purposes.
So let's consider that read into the record now as a motion, but I'll need one of.
I'll move that motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Right, so it's been moved and seconded to approve that motion. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries too. And now we're to E, which is the Brown Act refresher. This is Skyline.
Oh, that's right, she's doing that.
Okay, so we're almost done with these. I think we have next month, 2 more months, okay. So, we decided to grab some political cartoons, and present them just as an opportunity for both review and if there's something that you guys want to discuss. So,
And to reiterate, I want to say that the Brown Act guarantees transparency in government.
yes.
So that's really the point of these cartoons.
I'd love to laugh about the Brown Act. That's a good thing.
Turn it on. Okay, so that one's kind of blurry, but you can see what's happening. So the Brown Act breaks down the walls of secrecy. That's what I get from this.
That seems kind of ominous.
And I will say that going through a lot of these, you know, I mean, we all know these political cartoons are often very critical of politics and politicians. So there's another one.
Used to. Terry used to.
Yeah, used to.
No, we all
You,
follow
yeah,
the
you
Brown
guys are
Act.
not
Yes, we all follow the Brown Act.
the rats in the
Not the
dark cave.
rats, right?
So here's another one. So, we all know that that's not how you guys feel, but a lot of public agencies wish that the Brown Act and open meetings laws would die. Yeah. So I think that's, yep, that's all we have.
Amazing.
We had a lot more,
Yeah,
but we
we had
didn't
a lot
want to
more.
share all of them.
But, so I think next month we'll just, maybe the next 2 months will be just overviews and, you know,
Review.
Pop quiz.
overall review. Yeah, we did a pop quiz, what, last month? Couple months ago. So, yeah, we're almost done and I'm sure you guys will be happy to have this one message.
You know what though, Kylan, it's been really useful. I mean, you know, we do feel like, yes, we're being schooled and yes, we're being, you know, but I think it's been a good thing, and you've done a really good job.
All right, thank you, Kyler. The next item is number 7, new business, and review and approval of updated video surveillance policy, 97 to 100.
All right, so we do have a video surveillance policy that was approved in 2017. But when I saw new cameras coming in, and this was in my early days, I said, "Ooh, do we have a policy?" We tracked down the policy. It took a little while, right, Stella? But we tracked down the policy, and we sent it to BB&K for their review. In the meantime, as I mentioned earlier, we're going ahead with an RFP for interior cameras. So it's especially important that we made sure that we were legally compliant and everything that the policy stated. So BB&K thought that the policy was really strong with a couple of exceptions. And the one is related to the Brown Act and public transparency. In the current policy, it gives a blanket provision to comply with the that precludes public disclosure of footage. And the revised language, as you'll see in here, confirms the district's intent to comply with Public Records Act, which means that in some cases, it will be allowable, dependent on consulting with the director and BB&K, to comply for a request for a tape of whatever it is that the Public Records Act is requesting. And BB&K also recommend that the policy state that cameras may or may not be monitored at any given time. And the interesting part about this is there is a case out there where a woman was being attacked, and I'm not sure it was in a library, but a woman was being attacked, and she had the expectation that she was being filmed and that somebody would be calling the police. And it wasn't being filmed at the time, and, therefore, BB&K is saying you have to say somewhere in your policy that that the cameras may or may not be turned on at any given time to protect you from that kind of lawsuit. In addition, they recommended some signage that we should place in the library, and you can read here what the U.S. Department of Justice is recommending. We will use this language as the basis for whatever signage we put up, but that's kind of the next step in all of this. So we're recommending approval of this revised policy based on the recommendations that we received from BB&K.
Okay, any questions?
Cindy, could you point out where the Brown Act related part is that you were talking about at the beginning?
Yeah, so
Let's see where that is.
on page 100, under general public requesting access to security camera footage, it did read confidentiality prohibit the general public from accessing or viewing security camera footage. And it isn't really the Brown Act, it's the Public Records Act. But it's transparency, it's related to transparency. If the library receives a request from the general public to inspect security footage, meaning that we'll never turn over footage to anyone. So what they suggested is we may be prohibited based on confidentiality, but it needs to be evaluated in terms of what we can turn over in the case of a Public Records Act.
Could you just describe a scenario that this would apply to? Like in what scenario would somebody do a PRA request for video footage of the interior of the library?
Probably the example I just gave would be one where someone was attacked in the library by another person. And, the law allows us, and this policy allows us to turn that over to the police, but it doesn't necessarily allow us to turn it over to an individual. So if an individual were to request that, that would be where we would have to evaluate it.
With legal assistance, I'm sure.
With BB, or whoever the attorney at the time is.
Okay.
All right, if there's no more questions, get a motion to approve this.
So moved.
A second.
Okay, so moved and seconded to approve this updated video surveillance policy. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, and that motion carries unanimously. Next, item B is review and approval of an addendum to the employment contract with interim library director. This is from me, and this, I believe, was needed because when you look back at the original contract that we had with Cindy, the day that the new director starts, Cindy's obligated to leave. You can read it that way. So what this is a pretty brief amendment to her existing contract, pretty easily read and understood, that allows her to stay on for another 14 days or whenever she chooses to terminate her employment before then, just to help with the transition from Cindy to Nikki. And I think it's wise for us to do that. She'll be hired at her regular hourly rate, which has already been approved. And when we do it this way, it minimizes any difficulties with pension retainment and things like that.
Oh,
So if there's any questions, you can direct them to me on this one.
and the time frame on this is 14 days,
14 calendar days.
calendar days. Okay.
All right. And, you know, Cindy's allowed to choose her, the hours, or work out the hours that they need between them for the transition. So that's an item that will be managed by the two outgoing and the incoming director.
Okay.
So, any other comments or questions?
Just that I'm grateful, again, that you're
We're
willing to do
grateful.
this.
Thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion then to approve this?
I would move that we approve this.
I'll second it. Second? Okay, moved and seconded to approve this contract amendment. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Right, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And then finally, we're down to correspondence. Are there any notes or comments on correspondence?
So you may have noticed that we have actually lots of correspondence in our package this month. The biggest thing that is different from usual is we heard from the Executive Office of the Board of Supervisors Conflict of Interest Lobbyist Division. They asked, well, our district is supposed to review our conflict of interest code. I think it's every 2 years, and we submitted a letter in October of 2018 requesting amendments to our conflict of interest code, and he just called me back last week regarding that. So they wanted to get the information and make sure it was still correct, which it was not, because it's been a year. And so basically what happens is their office looks at our code, looks at all of our filers, and then they submit, and you'll see the letter here, which is from their office to the Board of Supervisors. So they submit what they recommend, the updates and the changes. Yeah, they make those recommendations, and then it gets approved, and then it comes back to us once it's approved and is in effect. So the proposed code and the current code is in there. Hopefully, I did print another copy of the proposed code, because for some reason when I put it into the board package, it had changed it. So basically they removed category 5 and added some positions and then changed or updated some positions. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Well, is there some follow-up on our part required for this?
No, so they did ask me, so what they had sent me, and you'll see in the email, was basically to circulate it to our staff and basically everybody, so that's why we wanted to include it in the board package. But I told them that if the board wanted to add it to a future agenda, then we would have to do that for the November meeting, and then we would get back to them. But if there's no you know, if you guys feel like there's no discussion needed, then, you know, we can let them know that it's, ready to go.
So have we already, on page 104, have we already made this a change from finance director to business manager?
So that's one of the changes that they're, noting
Okay.
to the Board of Supervisors. Another one though that I noticed just now actually is that they said in their letter they were going to include building projects manager and then it wasn't on the list of designated positions. So I will have to ask about that. Okay, so collection development manager, they had asked me about the positions, and I told them we currently don't have a collection development manager, but that I wasn't sure of that, the future of that position. Cindy clarified that that position will probably not exist going forward, but because the duties were kind of divided between, I think Stella's still overseeing some of that, and then Carlene has taken a lot of that on, so we just need to discuss whether or not we're gonna include library manager, because then, you know, if we added that, all library managers would then have to file, which wouldn't really make sense because there's such a big division of duties. And, you know, collection development manager, you know, falls under this code, this was added, not by me. They had added this, like 4 years ago, but, yeah, we just need to decide how we're gonna handle that, and if, you know, if Carlene maybe needs to file under that collection development manager, or if we need to just change that title. But that's something that we have to clarify with them. But they did say we don't have to file, like, because it's on the list, that doesn't mean we're gonna have to file that, and that's actually a position that doesn't even get submitted along with the IT manager. Those positions, their Form 700s actually stay with us. The originals get filed with us and they don't get filed with the county like the trustees and the director does. So that one's just, you know, it's kind of up to the director.
Because when I read all this, I kind of thought they were messing with our titles a little bit, and we put a lot of thought into how folks, what jobs should be called and so on, and this kind of threw a wrench in it from my first reading, so I was trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think we could delete collection development manager because Stella has incorporated that into her position as public services director.
And they added that position, and that wasn't the only reason. Part of it was they asked me and clarified whether or not the public services director kind of assumes the duties of the director in the absence of the director, which I said yes. So that was also the reason why they added that position to the designated positions, but I did mention the duties of the collection development manager, and so we could probably just let them know to remove, and Cindy and I discussed this today, to remove the collection development manager, because it's kind of covered, but I need to get back to them anyway, because I see they didn't include building projects manager on the list, but it's in their letter, so that was another one that they, that was actually submitted a year ago, and they're just now.
So this is sort of a to be continued kind of a thing, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, so basically I just wanted to make sure it was in the board package, and then if you guys feel that there needs to be more discussion, or, you know, staff or residents or anybody feels like the board needs to talk about it and discuss it, then we could add it to the November agenda. If not, Cindy and I can go over it and make sure that everything's correct and let them know, and then it goes, to the Board of Supervisors for their approval.
That'd probably work with us, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
good.
fine.
Thanks.
Why do we report to the county on this, but virtually nothing else?
Well, with the Form 700s, in other places, they go straight to the FPPC. For whatever reason, maybe because we're a special district, the county handles a lot of things that, like the conflict of interest forms, we submit to them, and I
then
think
they send it.
they file it, yeah. But they do that for multiple districts. Cause I've actually gone to FPPC workshops, and they talk about, the differences in agencies that file directly with the FPPC or agencies that file with the county. And so we file with the county, and I don't know, I mean, they have some sort of record that they're keeping as well, but they do like the higher level filing for the agencies that they oversee.
All right, thanks, Kyla. So I recorded several future agenda items for November that we'll talk about. The Franklin Elementary School situation is one of them, and a couple of others here. I got those recorded. Are there any other items that the board would like to add to the next agenda?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear whether you included just the discussion of director evaluation.
Yes.
Yeah.
On that one, I took away that Nikki and I at least will meet, get you involved too, you know, if we can, and talk about what the benchmark should be, and then we're gonna bring that back to the board at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask this question because according to Betsy's report, there was a mention of the library helping with the census for 2020. And there might be funding to, with that. And I'm just wondering, is there any plans to really go after whatever funding there might be and whatever the requirements might be for that? I don't know if that might help or not, but I know that census and, voting is going to be real critical 2020.
I don't know that I heard about funding in particular, and Estella and I had a chance to talk about this a little bit while we were together at the conference, that, I don't think there are firm plans about how to move forward with that, but I think we do want to be involved with, providing, I don't know if I'll go so far as to get what they were calling a kiosk where people could actually fill out the census form here. There are people from, the census organization who can offer to be on your site for a couple of hours a week during the run-up to Census Day, which is April 1st. I mean, I think we're probably at the point of making those plans soon.
We have connected with the local area manager, I don't know what they're called, but I know Chloe and I both spoke to a couple of people that are working with the census. And I also, in meeting with people from League of Women Voters, they, regarding other programs, they also expressed interest in some type of partnership with the library for census outreach, because I know that's one of their big pushes as well.
Okay, that's fine then.
The other special district directors are in touch with me too about what they're doing, so I'm in an email conversation in my personal email that I should be able to update too. On what they're doing, and I know Michelle Pereira, who's the director of Pasadena, has been on the task force with ALA about it. So I'm getting over conference, and then I'm gonna talk to her about that too.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, why are you home sleeping, Nikki?
I'm in my last 2 days at work, so I'll have a little time off.
All right, with that, can I get a motion then to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move that.
And I'll second that.
All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned at 7:21 p.m. Thank you very much.
Outstanding.
That'd be a record.